we get started on the program today of The Toast, we want to say that this program is meant for people to have a voice. Influential people in our community could be a congressman, could be the local farmer down the street. But we always want to have people that have thought-provoking conversations on this podcast to educate our community, to have those tough conversations that elevate us just a little bit harder. And today we have one of the best guests that we could have got this month with Congressman John Duarte, who last year we were able to send to Congress. John, thanks for having us today.
Good to be here, Sam.
Hey, so how's the last year now been? You've been about 14 months elected into Congress, correct?
Absolutely, yeah.
And how has it been since then? Has it been kind of a whirlwind, a shock? Your first term in Congress, has that been pretty different?
Well, the first thing I want to say, it's been an incredible honor to represent the Central Valley and the communities here in the Central Valley in Congress. Coming out of a greenhouse operation, a farming background, to be able to go to Washington, D.C., and walk into the Capitol building up I call them the I'm still just a Bill stairs, going up to the dome. When I go to vote, I try and use them as often as I can, unless it's really raining outside. I use the tunnels. And I'm just in awe of the honor and the responsibility and the privilege to be able to represent the Central Valley in Congress. I hope that doesn't fade. But this last year, an unprecedented use of the word unprecedented from beginning to end back in Congress, from the difficulty in getting, our native son of the Valley here, Kevin McCarthy, installed as Speaker, to his fairly tragic and incoherent removal.
Yeah.
And then reestablishing Mike Johnson as Speaker, who's a very good man and caused none of this, and is doing a great job as a Speaker could under these conditions. And now being back there as part of a 1 or 2 seat majority, the Central Valley should be very proud that between David Valadeo and myself, the Valley put in some very difficult districts 2 Republicans that are keeping the gavel out of the other side's hands and stopping the socialist New Green Deal from going any further than it already has.
Well, it's probably pretty different for you because you grew up your whole life. Are you a 4th-generation farmer in the Central Valley?
I am.
Yeah. So you grew up your whole life in boots and working in fields and growing businesses, and now you're on the Capitol steps representing, hundreds of thousands of people in your district.
No, it's true. I was born in Modesto. I was there till I was 10. Then we actually moved to San Diego when I was young, at 10 years old. From 76 until 89, I lived in San Diego. We're always in agriculture. My parents had a houseplant nursery down there on Otay Mesa, just a quarter mile from the Mexican border. So I worked out there in the greenhouses in the nursery on summers and after school and during breaks. And then when I got out of college, that nursery had kind of gone under. And out of the ashes of that, my mom and dad and my brother Jeff and I started bootstrapping Duarte Nursery back in Houston at my great-grandfather's ranch, where my grandparents then lived.
And so you guys were doing more of like ornamental house plants and things like that in San Diego?
Yeah.
And then moved to a production scale agriculture,
Then moved
right?
back to initially grapevines.
Mm-hmm.
And then by 1996, we started doing containerized almond trees. By 2000, pistachio trees. About 2005, we did walnuts and began to do citrus also.
Wow. So you've drastically changed the operation. And how has that been, going from an actual, more like retail horticulture sale to now working in production agriculture where things are tight? We're trying to get trees for as cheap as we can, right? Yeah. And we're trying to farm as low cost as we can, but it's difficult. How was that transition for you?
Well, yes, in the ornamental horticulture side, we rode the housing booms up and down. And so we had the same kind of cyclicality we do now in agriculture, just oftentimes just the opposite. Usually when housing's doing real well, ag tends to be doing really badly. But it's all the same in family business. You've got to get through these hard times, and then all of a sudden you wake up on the other side of the wall and times are good again, and you got to convince yourself they're not going to last forever. And be smart. Expand the operation as you can, resist temptations for airplanes, vacation homes, all the kinds of shiny things that sometimes we feel attracted towards when times are good, and keep the operation serious, pay down debt, build up your team, and be well positioned for when the next storm comes, because they do.
And now you've really built a family organization. I know I've met with your son. I think he's helping a little bit more now out on the farm.
Yep.
Now that you're in Congress, your brother's there, your wife, everyone in the family is involved in the operation. It's not just your family; it's like the community. I think I read somewhere that you employ about 1,000 people in that area.
We have employed well
Yeah.
over that at times. We currently employ several hundred.
Mm-hmm.
My wife Alexandra is there. She and I also run our own farming operation. Our son Isaac just came out of Cal Poly with a crop science degree, so we're very happy to have Isaac back as I'm traveling and distracted more. My brother Jeff and I have been at the company since its very beginning, and he's now the president CEO of the company. And I'm doing this. I'm a congressman.
What made you throw your hat into the ring? What made you actually want to run and probably walk away from a lot of the farming aspect, the day-to-day business you were used to, and be in Congress?
Well, I've always been happy to write the checks to Jeff Denham. We've had Kevin McCarthy at our home, Devin Nunes at our home in Modesto. Did a fundraiser for David Valadeo in 2020. Was very happy to help. Very happy to pat these guys on the back and thank them for their service. When this seat came up, there really was no credible, the 13th Congressional District. In my opinion, there was no credible Republican candidate in the race. I looked at it. I felt I could win it. We have credibility with a lot of farmers here in the district. We have credibility with a lot of the working families here in the district that have been at the nursery and worked at the nursery or have relatives and friends who've worked at the nursery. And I felt a responsibility that if I didn't like the way the United States was going at the time, and I did not like the socialist agenda that was taking hold of America at the time in 2022, that I wanted to be part of the solution. I wanted to step up. And so I decided, talked to my wife, Alexandra, and we began to run for Congress. We'd thought about it and then pulled back because it's never good for business.
Yeah.
But then our state party chairman, Jessica Patterson, was a friend of mine, and she called me and said, I think you'd be great. And I still joke with her. I say, I don't know if I was Mr. Right or just Mr. Right now after she'd gone down the list. but nonetheless, we looked at it and I thought, if I don't run and stop the socialist agenda now in this way, or at least give it my very best shot, I'm going to be like a bitter old 70-year-old guy who didn't do what he thought he should do at the time he could do it. And I really took inventory and just decided that, hey, this is the best way to serve America. And there was a calling for me to do it from in myself. And so we stepped in and Alexandra and I got very, very busy. Whatever I take on, it kind of lands on her to organize it.
Yeah, she's the strong support that we all have to
Oh
have,
my
right?
God, she still has weekly calls with my staff and my campaign and my fundraising, and
She's the real manager of the organization, right?
I think I work for her. Yeah.
So now that you were in Congress, you said early on it was pretty quick that Kevin got taken out and removed. What was that like, being in Congress at that time, and really an unprecedented? We haven't seen a lot of those things happen at that level. What was that like?
Oh, it was real. I heard Mike Johnson, our new speaker, describe it as a Greek tragedy, and that's how he represents it. And I agree with him. I think that's a great description of it. These fools, the 8 Republicans that took out Kevin McCarthy, robbed our country of a generational leader. Kevin was that good. His energy level. There were days I spent with Kevin traveling, as well as knowing that when he got on the plane at 2 p.m, he'd already been up for 8 or 10 hours, going full steam, and he went full steam all the way until 9, 10 o'clock that night, and then traveled some more to the next thing. That's the energy level it takes. And when you're with Kevin, you'll find that he's just engaged with you. He's talking about things that matter. He's giving you his rationale behind what he's doing and how he sees things in a very honest way, in a way where you can learn from him, but you can also challenge him directly and fairly, because he's clear about what he's doing and why he's doing it. Those things are unique. They're things we'd like to have be more common in the world, but they're very unique. Kevin not only was able to raise money, which we all know, he raised $500 million. I think he singularly stopped socialism in America, and I was a small part of that in this race. But he raised the money, he knew how to raise the money, and he also knew his candidate horseflesh. He could spot a candidate in a district, whether it was Monica de la Cruz down in southern Texas, or it was myself in this district, or David Valadeo when Kevin recruited him to run again in 2020 to retake his seat after having lost it. Kevin McCarthy knew the candidates and the districts and how to recruit the right ones, then get behind him and push him over the line. This is not something one builds in a few years.
Yeah.
This was a 16-year journey for Kevin McCarthy to not only build the majority, but to have the acumen to be such an effective speaker. And I look at what happened to him, and I think this was as much about God's distribution of gifts and jealousies as it was about any policy that Kevin put forth or compromise that he had to make in the realities of his job.
It felt like it was a little bit of a split for the party. Like, we want to be united as one, but when that whole situation was going on, it felt like it really drug the party into two different areas.
Yeah, that time it was 8 versus 211. The sad thing about Kevin having been pulled out there was it was 8 members of our party who did it, and they had no support from the rest of the conference.
Yeah, the votes kept failing every time that they try to bring someone else up. I mean, how many days did it take? It was a
3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah.
It was, and America was rudderless. And I think the Democrats made a mistake in their own right. I mean, obviously, if a party wants to destroy himself, you really will sit back and let them if they're your opponent. But realize that days after Kevin McCarthy was vacated, Israel was terrorized with the attacks from Hamas, and America was rudderless. And we still haven't voted the aid package through for Israel to help our ally in this very difficult time. And I think some of the Democrat congressionals that voted to vacate Kevin McCarthy because they thought it was fun and opportunistic have to look at that vote today and regret what it did to America's ability to help our friends around the world.
Yeah, I mean, it basically held up everything else for 4 weeks, right?
Yeah, we haven't helped Ukraine. We haven't helped Taiwan. We haven't helped Israel. We've really failed many of our friends geopolitically because somebody thought it would be good to get Kevin. It's not a good move, not our brightest hour, but, again, it's part of being in the Capitol, and, whether it's this happening or close votes on other issues or threatened government shutdowns, which thankfully haven't occurred, I can still walk outside the Capitol and get asked these same questions, by reporters on a daily basis. Say, it has been unprecedented. Crazy things are happening, but look, everything that's happened this last year has been settled under that Capitol dome. Even if times we want to call it the big top, it's been settled under the Capitol dome through our constitutional republic. And that's a real gift, to be grinding through this kind of divisiveness in society, these kinds of very close governing majorities in both houses, a president who's unpopular, very unpopular, and getting worse every day, and still our constitutional republic holds up. These farmers and Navy SEALs and mayors and judges and county commissioners from all over the country are coming together and working it out in the House of Congress and in the Senate. And the republic goes on, and we take on the next challenge.
I don't think most people see that every day, right? We're not in the Capitol. We turn on Fox News or CNN or whatever we turn on at night, and we don't always feel like we have that connection over there of what is happening. I mean, if there's one thing a constituent or just a voter in this country can take from here and go home and try to learn, what is that one thing that they should really be focusing on of how Congress works, of how the government works?
Well, I really, really want folks to understand there are a lot of very good people in Congress on both sides of the aisle. I think more on our side, but but there are a lot of very good people in Congress. And for all the partisanship, like there's certain committees I'm on. I'll use Jared Huffman, a California representative from up in Mendocino County, Humboldt County, who was an NRDC attorney before he was in Congress. Real environmental, other side of me on water, on many things.
Yeah.
And we'll go in there in the committee meetings and we'll go for it. I mean, watch it. And it's not caustic, but it's certainly confrontational.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get in the elevator and we'll ask each other, how's your weekend? What are you doing? We leave it on the ice. We're playing very hard on the ice, but the divisiveness and the interpersonal acrimonies that sometimes bleed out into the media are more rare than are the collegiality, the mutual respect. And it's not about making a new friend. It's about giving the American people the very best service we can. And that requires that we have normal conversations, that we interpersonally respect each other, even if we starkly disagree on a number of the issues we're working through.
The world is dominated by dynamic duos. Mario and Luigi, Batman and Robin. Well, here at the Ag Center, we have a dynamic duo with Kane Compost being the highest quality compost in the state and the best spreaders available too with Tree Barber. Give us a call today. Let's get that compost spread on the field and let's make sure that those trees have the best ability this year. Correct me if I'm wrong, but a big piece of, your original running is a lot of things with EPA. And
Yeah.
you're not a extremely pro-regulatory.
No.
And I think you've had some experience in that on the farming
I
side.
sure have, yeah.
I mean, we've seen regulatory make massive dairies go out of business here, farming operations, construction, whatever it is. Regulatory does kind of hurt us at some point because it becomes our hands are tied. And you've had that experience on the farming side.
Oh, absolutely. And just as the nation is watching California right now and wondering, how do we not become California?
Mm-hmm.
California needs to watch Europe. The slaughtering and the reduction of their herds, of their animal protein systems, their farmers not being able to use nitrogen on the farm, their food shortages. I think in Europe, the economic blights caused by the regulatory system and their globalists and their global warming issues is best encapsulated. One of the editorials I read here a few months ago, women in Europe in the 20s and 30s, age of reproductive age,
Yeah.
are by larger and larger numbers than we've ever seen before freezing their embryos because they can't get married, buy a home, have a family, and afford to raise children in their natural reproductive ages. They're hoping that if they freeze their embryos, they can have children in their 40s and 50s and raise them before they retire.
Is this in Europe or is
That's
this
in Europe right
okay.
now at numbers we've never seen before. And as we see these housing costs, wage pressures, Kellogg's advertising breakfast cereal for dinner because American consumers are so strapped. There's a reason we're not selling as many almonds as we used to. We're not seeing the growth in almond sales as we used to. It's because it's a premium plant protein,
Mm-hmm.
and the American consumer has been crushed. We're seeing that in wine, cheese. We're seeing it in butter. We're seeing it across the spectrum in agricultural and food system. Is that the American consumer just can't afford the same produce and protein on their dinner plate as they could a half a generation ago.
And you believe that's highly because regulatory issues?
It's entirely, it's no water on the farms. It's not drilling American oil. I sit on Energy and Minerals subcommittee and natural resources. We're abandoning resources left, right, and center. We're abandoning our forest resources. We're abandoning our mining resources. We're abandoning our food production resources, energy. And when we say we're going to stop drilling American oil, it's completely ludicrous. Even if Zeus could fart the kilowatts we need to keep our grid lit,
Yeah.
Much less solar panels or windmills, you still need plastics. You need pharmaceuticals. We need fertilizers. There's so much chemistry and consumer products made out of crude oil and natural gas that abandoning natural American oil and gas production is ridiculous, even if we solve energy with, implementing nuclear technologies at hand or hoping for new ones in the future, which we should do more of.
Mm-hmm.
You still need oil and gas to make synthetic products. Many things, the paint on your house, most of your car.
Yeah.
And so these anti-resource, I call these guys the lords of scarcity. And as farmers, as resource producers, as manufacturers, we are the champions of abundance. And we really need to grab back the morality of what the environmental communities tried to steal from us. They've tried to make what we do in terms of feeding people, heating homes, providing the goods people need to improve their lives, the pharmaceuticals for their health. This is moral. What we do owns the morality of abundance and affordability and opportunity, and ultimately freedom. You can't be free if you're hungry. The environmental extremists and the ESG, DEI folks, the whole left-wing
Every acronym they throw out.
nonsense battalion of alphabet soup is an immoral group. They're tearing down the things that feed people, that keep us warm. They're destroying our community. They're trying to make us these people and those people. Now, most of us get up in the morning and, I don't look in the mirror and say, as a Portuguese American, what do I want in the world today? And I don't think many people from many backgrounds do. I think we're all here looking for the American dream. And I don't think the American dream really cares what color we are, what's our religion, or what language did our ancestors speak. The American dream just cares that we work together to go get it, so more and more of us can have it. And so when we look at my experiences as a farmer up north, and I mean, as you were asking, Sam, so in 2011 we bought a piece of property up in Tehama County. And we decided, well, we're not ready. We're building greenhouses at a rate of knots. Then the nursery deal was wide open. Wish those days were back, right? And so we didn't want to put an orchard in. We wanted to focus our resources on expanding the nursery. So we just decided to plant wheat. This property had wheat planted on it many, many times before. Since the 1980s, it had been left to grazing because wheat prices were low. And I've made charts and shown all this at different discussions. In 2010, 11, 12, we had a global food crisis and the price of wheat was high. So we went out there and tilled the land to plant wheat. The local Army Corps of Engineers regulator, one guy in 5 counties, drove by and from his windshield decided we deep ripped it for trees without going through the right permits.
But it's wheat, you're only going 4 inches.
It was 4 to 7 inches.
Yeah.
Their own government expert report literally said it was 4 to 7 inch tillage. They said it might have been 12 inches where we grabbed a chunk of hard pan that somebody else tilled up earlier and tilled it on its side, and it left maybe an 11 or 12 inch debit where the hard pan was moved from. And they gave us a cease and desist order. We asked them to come out to the field and look at what we were doing. We asked them to give us a hearing. They kicked us up to enforcement and told all kinds of other regulatory agencies that we'd destroyed wetlands and polluted water and all kinds of other nonsense. They'd never give us a hearing. So the Pacific Legal Foundation, which is a public interest law firm that I call them the American Civil Liberties Union for productive people. They oftentimes represent farmers and builders and property owners. And they represented us on a pro bono level to sue the government under Fifth Amendment due process claims. Well, once the government decided they couldn't get that kicked out of court, they countersued us, and they literally said, we're suing them because they're suing us, which is a First Amendment violation of our rights on top of the Fifth Amendment violation of our rights. That went forward. The original judge we had, Carlton, was the old Jimmy Carter appointee, Democrat, but a Jimmy Carter appointee. He retired and passed away. He was older. And we got a new judge, Kimberly Mueller, who was an Obama-appointed Democrat judge. Well, our fortunes changed dramatically. And this was under the Obama administration. And at first I thought, wow, once the public learns what they're doing to us, once the public learns the facts behind this, they're going to back off and settle. And we're going to get a reasonable settlement out of this to be able to plant our orchards and go forward. Well, no. What I've learned today is it's greatly what we see in the public with our presidential candidate, Donald Trump. These agencies, these prosecutors, the Department of Justice wants America to see these unfounded prosecutions. This is part of fascism setting in. This is how they convince Americans not to stand up to the government, not to dig their heels in, not to cross their arms and get a lawyer and prosecute their case. And the government is by delivering unjust results, by making darn sure you don't have a chance in court, by having judges that'll back up. You saw $350 million because, theoretically the banks didn't know how to appraise a property in New York.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ludicrous. But that is what they're trying to show us as Americans, is that we can't stand up, we can't keep our government under control, and we should give up trying. And so I think winning these seats, running for Congress and winning the congressional seat is how we say, yes, we do own you. You don't own us. This is by the people, for the people, not.
Remember whose taxes pay the light bill, right?
Yeah, the citizenry is the prime estate of this constitutional republic. It's not the judiciary. It's not the presidency. It's not the legislator. It's the citizenry. We are the prime estate, and I think we're going to see ourselves heighten our voice in this cycle.
Yeah, I think this next election will be extremely loud. I think the hardest part for people is just seeing the contradiction coming, especially from a regulatory side in every single piece of legislation. I mean, we focus so hard in California here to, neutralize greenhouse gases. And for 20 years, we built up this bank that we neutralize, but then one fire, because we weren't deforesting properly, destroyed all of that with carbon back in the air.
Yeah. And there's many reasons that, I mean, even the concept of settled science, if anything, we graduate and we educate PhDs every year at institutions all over the world, most of the best ones right here in America, to challenge science, to find the next thing to talk about, to prove and disprove what's already been thought to be true. And there is never settled science. The concept of settled science, quit arguing with me about the science of global warming.
Yeah.
It's over. It's decided. You need to be set aside because you're facially illegitimate because you're questioning global warming.
Mhm.
No, there's a lot of drivers of climate change historically and currently and in the future. There's the tilt of this Earth towards the sun. There's the orbit we're on. There's natural CO2 emissions. There's natural methane emissions that all interplay with climate. There's tides that cause different data. Even the weather stations themselves, whether they're located near an urban heat shadow or in a more rural area, can have a lot of variation and extrapolate and suggest different kinds of trends that may or may not be there. They just may be close to an urban center that's been expanding for the last 30 years.
So you sit on a lot of these committees, correct? You're on
Yes.
the Natural Resource Committee. You're on the Agriculture Committee too.
I am, and transportation infrastructure.
And all three of those, I'm sure all day long you are looking at regulatory.
Oh, we are. I mean, the natural resources, see, if you don't spend a lot of money in your committee, like transportation infrastructure has a lot of money,
Okay.
right? And agriculture has the Farm Bill. We're arguing over that. So there's a lot of money there. So things get pretty amicable and you try and agree because that's where you're spending money. Well, when you get to natural resources, actually it gets the most ridiculous in there because there's no money to really spend in natural resources. There's a little bit, but not a lot. And so you're talking about these guys defending they've released grizzly bears into Yellowstone, and they told them once they got to a population of 800 bears, they'd start culling the bears and that they wouldn't be allowed to then leave the Yellowstone National Park. Well, they're well over 800 bears. They're twice that. And they're climbing by about 20% a year in population. So the compounding growth rate has got cattle farmers, sheep ranchers, families, rural communities all over the Western Plains threatened by these huge apex predators.
Yeah.
And the Fish and Wildlife won't let any change come to the endangered species classification of the grizzly bears that allow them to be defensively culled, allow families to shoot the grizzly bears before they start invading them. And now we've got wolves released. We found wolves in Tulare County now, all the way down from the Yellowstone wolf releases. So these are pack animals, again, apex predators.
Yep.
These are going to cause real economic harms and real safety issues for families up and down the state. Two things happen. One is when you don't shoot them, you don't cull them.
Mm-hmm.
They get bigger in population. They start pressing up against populated areas for their interface. The other thing is, like we saw up in Georgetown, I have a vineyard right up in El Dorado County near Georgetown. Just the other day, a mountain lion attacked two brothers and killed one of them out hunting for antlers. Wow. Well, when you don't shoot at these animals, when they're not afraid of humans killing them or hunting them, they get more aggressive towards humans. We're not that intimidating until we have weapons that go bang. Mm-hmm. When you stop hunting, these animals become more aggressive. And we're not only releasing dangerous animals, but we're making them more dangerous by letting them go without any kind of pushback from humans.
Does the Natural Resources Committee, do they have a lot to do with water as well, or does that mainly stay in the Agriculture Committee?
No, actually, agriculture doesn't have a lot to do with water rights. It has to do with EQIP grants and water conservation projects that are on farm and some important things that way, irrigation systems. But the Natural Resources Committee has a lot to do with waters in terms of the Endangered Species Act. And that's one reason I wanted to be on there, because a lot of the salmon flows, a lot of the smelt flows fall under the Endangered Species Act. And I've been able to, if someone goes on, Instagram and pulls up Rep. John Duarte, R-E-P, like Representative John Duarte, they can see my Instagram feed of all my hearings where I'm chewing out or sternly questioning regulators on some of the issues that are important to us here in the Valley. And so Natural Resources have the endangered species issues, and then Army Corps of Engineers has actually regulated under the Waterways, Ports, and Harbors subcommittee of the Transportation Infrastructure Committee. So I get to see a lot of my friends there.
You get to see the guys that you've been in court with a few times.
Yeah, a few of them, or their bosses. But I'll tell you, we had the Sackett decision. I don't know if you follow it, but the Sackett decision was a major wetlands jurisdiction Supreme Court case that came down late last year. And for all of us that have been involved in the wetlands issues for farming and land use and ranching, that was a watershed moment for us. That was a decision that came down that was very clear, very much in favor of property owners and farmers and developers. And the administration has completely ignored it. They've written up wetlands jurisdictions that are completely in the face of what the Supreme Court told them they had jurisdiction over or not. So we've got a long battle here to push back this regulatory state.
Wow. And in that too, you can also have some federal grants for water storage, correct? Is that in that same committee?
In the Ag Committee, there's federal EQIP grants for on-farm storage.
Okay.
And so Jimmy Panetta, one of my bipartisan Democrat friends in Congress from Monterey area, he and I put through the Gates Act, which says we're going to if we want to do, conservation acreage, if we want to do large EQIP projects for recharge basins and ponds and water takeoffs from rivers and such, we can't have a low income limit for qualification for EQIP grants because we want the big farmers to do these things.
Yeah, they have the most ground to put forward.
They've got the capital, the ground, the time horizons. So we need to take the income limits off EQIP grants and other conservation programs so we can get the big farmers that really hold a lot of land to participate in them. So we're working together on that as a bipartisan bill. But the Army Corps has a lot to do with dredging the rivers. One of my big initiatives to create more water in California is looking at our flood control dam capacities. So if you look in the reservoirs, we hold 600,000 acre feet, New Melones or Don Pedro for flood control. And this is governed by the Bureau of Reclamation, the Army Corps of Engineers. Now that flood control is all based on what size storms might happen and how fast can we get rid of the water. So since last year, I've been trying to get WRDA, Water Resources Appropriation Act, WRDA, Water Resource Appropriation Development Act resources for dredging the rivers and drainages through the valley here. So if we dredge the rivers and drainages here, a few years ago, a little over a year ago, we were flushing 150,000 cubic feet per second out to the Delta. And that was at max capacity. If something in Tulare wouldn't have broken, something in Mendota or Firebaugh would have broken. We would have had flooding somewhere. It happened in the southern part of the valley instead of here. Well, if we can dredge and we can get those flow rates up to 180,000 cubic feet per second, that means we can safely hold more water in the dams and have less head space in the dams. That's like creating 1 million acre feet of water just by dredging the waterways, dredging the silt and the vegetation out of these waterways at choke points. You don't have to go up and down the whole thing with a D9. You can just relieve the choke points along the waterways. We have satellite LIDAR and other technologies to tell us exactly where that needs to take place. And so that's one thing I'm trying to do is get dredging through. If somebody hears that we talk about dredging a lot, it's actually to increase our flood capacity so we can hold more water in our dams every year.
Yeah, it seems like that is probably one of the only solutions because we can't get the state to enact anything.
No, the state won't get behind it. I do think there's going to be a strong push for water resources and changing the way we manage our water infrastructure. If we change administrations, which I hope we do. If we can get there, there's a lot we can do better. We're choosing scarcity. The Democrats that run California and the Biden administration are choosing scarcity of water. They're choosing scarcity of energy. They're not allowing America to be the best place to build a business and create jobs.
Yeah.
And that's coming down on the backs of our working families. There's a lot of people changing the party affiliation right now, seeing that if they want the American dream, if they want the opportunity that they expected when they came to America or that previous generations have had, they've got to get to to support representatives who promote abundance and deregulation and make sure that job creators can get busy and make California and the U.S. a great place to build a business. We're not that right now.
Yeah, no, we're not. I mean, that's why I really believe sending businessmen like yourself to Congress has been one of the smartest moves. I mean, there's been you and just a few others that understand what it's like to run a business. That there's months that are terrible, and there's good months, and there's times that we got to just keep people fed on payroll.
Well, when my business doesn't have the revenue, we have layoffs. Federal government needs to do the same.
Yeah.
We need to move people out of the federal government and into productive part of our economy. The only way we fight inflation is by having more people make more stuff. You know, productivity. Someone in the government regulating is making zero. That puts dinner on the table, that puts clothes on your back, that builds a home somebody can live in or a road to get to work in. So the smaller we can make our bureaucracies, the better we are in terms of opportunity, because those people become productive and we get affordability back. So,
and I think that's why those jobs don't get counted in unemployment data and things like that, because they're counted as ultimately safe positions.
Yeah. Yeah, you look at all the job growth. If the Biden administration comes out and looks at job growth, a huge portion of it's in government.
Yeah.
We're cutting the government the best we can right now with the current balance of power we have in D.C.
Yeah.
And still the government's the biggest source of new jobs there is right now.
Yep, 80,000 IRS agents and whatever else they're on.
So there's more to get done.
Wow. Thanks for watching today's podcast on the Toast. If you haven't went over to theagcenter.com, click the shop page and look at all the products and services that we offer here at the Ag Center. Fertility, compost, deep ripping, whatever you need, we're here to service you this year. Give us a call or go online at theagcenter.com. On the agricultural committee, I mean, right now, the Farm Bill, I think, got pushed out till September. So we're still on the 2018 Farm Bill as of now. It's getting pushed through till September at the end of this year. Is that
as of now? Yes.
That's when the vote's supposed to happen, or
yes.
Okay. What are you seeing in that? Because right now the farming economy, these rates are making it extremely difficult to pull operating capital.
Yeah.
Making it extremely difficult to grow. You can't make land here convert at 8 to 9% interest.
No, it doesn't work. Certainly not at current commodity prices.
Yeah.
And fertilizer prices and ag chem prices and labor prices. It's very hard to get any net income operating your farm today.
So is that conversation being had as this new farm bill comes and approaches in September?
It's being had. But a lot of these issues are more macro issues than farm policy.
Mm-hmm.
And we can have a disaster relief program, but if the economics of farming are broadly a disaster, that's not a disaster relief program. That's an economic headwind that farming policy alone won't change. You know, we've got to drill American oil. We've got to get fertilizer cheaper. We've got to get diesel cheaper. We've got to get the economy going again. We've got to take on some of our trade issues. I've got a bill called FRATS, Foreign Retaliatory Agricultural Tariff Supplement. Basically, China is still sitting. We've won at the World Trade Organization. America has won a 5-year lawsuit against China for their retaliatory agricultural tariffs that were put in place. China still has retaliatory agricultural tariffs in place. They have ignored the World Trade Organization. They're in violation of the lawsuit's results. And American farmers still can't export to China on equal terms with, you know, Brazilian soy producers or Australian almond producers or European wine producers, you know, or European dairy producers. We're simply not on a level playing field. So I've got a bill. It's actually now called Market Facilitation Retaliatory Ag Tariff Supplement. They didn't like FRATs, so I gave them MFRATs. So whatever that means. And it would simply say, hey, export your almonds to China. If you're the almond company, export almonds to China. If they tag you with a 25% retaliatory ag tariff, we'll use the Commodity Credit Corporation monies that are there for making sure American farm commodities are marketed well and efficiently, and supplement that back to the exporter. So we want this to be available for wine, almonds, walnuts, pistachios, soybeans, corn, every product that America exports. We want to neutralize the retaliatory ag tariffs. Now, this is an authority that the Secretary of Agriculture already has. If Secretary Vilsack were to say, hey, I'm just going to do a market facilitation program like President Trump did a market facilitation program 5-6 years ago, he could. And if you wanted to refine it a little bit to say, instead of giving everybody money, as the last one did, we're just going to supplement back retaliatory ag tariffs to those who actually export, that will clear the gluts. That will get our prices back to where they need to be sustainable. And I believe this is the path forward to get us out of this agricultural downturn.
If Tom Vilsack already has that power, why is he not taking those into action?
We are seeing almost no leadership whatsoever from this administration on trade.
The whole cabinet.
The agricultural trade, we're just not seeing any initiatives being taken right now. It's even when we did the relief program, remember a couple of years ago we had the storms, the fires, the freeze, and there's a very large, a $450 million relief program nationwide to help growers get through those times. Well, that relief program was sent through the USDA, as is what happens. In the Secretary Vilsack's folks put so many DEI, ESG advantages for one group of people to get money out of that program versus those who'd actually seen losses, that the program ended up doing very little to protect our food supply, did very little to help our actual food producers, and was more of a social engineering project on the part of this administration than it was a food affordability and farm sustainability program that it was allocated to. That's the kind of stuff we see from this administration constantly.
Yeah, I mean, the second you put regulatory or ESG on the family farm, makes it extremely difficult. Yeah. Everyone cares about sustainability and the environment, but those standards are so high that you need massive capital to be able to do those.
They're high and they're vague at the same time. They keep saying we've got to stop global warming, we've got to do this and that. But when you're solving non-problems, you can really use your imagination.
Yeah.
And that's what we see time and again. That's one reason if we could pass a good farm bill this year, I'd be all for it. I want to work with Chairman G.T. Thompson from Pennsylvania, who I've often described as a great coach in a really tough league. You know, he was handed a tough job to do this year with a very tiny majority in the House, a Senate that wants to inflate everything towards ESG, DEI. The 2018 Farm Bill that we're working under now, we just passed ag appropriations around that were, I think, fairly favorable to ag producers, was passed when we had complete control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency. So we're living under an outdated Farm Bill, but not a badly skewed Farm Bill. And so I don't want to replace the Farm Bill we're under with a Farm Bill that's much worse in many ways. And so if we can pass a good one this time, that's great. If we can pass it as a partisan bill out of the House with unanimous Republican support, send it to the Senate where they have a small Democratic majority, and then come back and conference that out and reach a good compromise that really does move the ball forward for food producers and consumers, great. If we're going to pass it through the House, otherwise, on suspension where we need 2/3 of the entire House to pass it, which means we probably lose half the Republicans and pick up most of the Democrats. And then it goes to the Senate where it's passed by Democrats and comes back to conference and probably gets even worse in the conference committee, then I'm very suspect of passing a farm bill this year.
What do you want to see in the farm bill from yourself?
I want to see the real priorities are, first of all, we've got to expand and make flexible EQIP. We talked about that. We've got to get the big farms engaged in water recharge basins and water sustainability. We've got to get the big farms engaged in that. We want to see price supports. The loan rates for Commodity Credit Corporation, the market loan rates for a lot of the commodity crops are very low. They're no longer relevant after all the inflation we've had over the last 4 years. We need to get those loan rates up. We need to make crop insurance affordable and flexible so more farms pick up crop insurance so we can get away from the disaster relief packages that get grossly abused now and get folks into crop insurance without tying into the crop insurance a lot of ESG and DEI requirements, because that's the goal. Is every time we get something from the government now, there's a lot of offsetting DEI, ESG stuff that becomes very incipient and pretty soon gets baked in. It won't be long before when you go to Ag Credit to get a loan, they'll tell you have to have crop insurance as a risk mitigation measure. When you buy the crop insurance, they'll then tell you that you've got to meet certain ESG initiatives and DEI initiatives and all this. And all of a sudden, if you don't start beating to the drum of this Euro globalist nonsense, you can't get a farm loan. And so we've got to be very careful in this farm bill to make sure we don't start really baking in some of the stuff that was done under Pelosi and Biden. Wow.
Yeah, I don't think the average consumer realizes farming. It's it's a debt game at the end of the day. We're
Yeah.
having to pull loans constantly, operating lines, whatever, acquire the next property for growth. But if we don't have good terms on those things and we get stuck with ESG initiatives behind it, it's going to be extremely hard to make those payments.
No, it's exactly right. And, you know, Sam, the other thing we're dealing with is 4 years ago, America was printing too much money.
Yeah.
We were printing about $1 trillion a year. And about half of that $1 trillion a year was going to the Federal Reserve and being bought up in what's called quantitative easing. So the Federal Reserve was just buying this debt, and they were great. They were the dumbest customer in the world.
Mm-hmm.
They bought the debt for very low interest, and they just grew the Federal Reserve balance sheet because they don't play with real money and real financial concerns like you or I do,
Mm-hmm.
or other investors do. And so America was floating about $500 billion a year into the real debt markets.
Yeah.
Right? People in countries actually buying our bonds and waiting for their returns. Well, today we've got quantitative tightening. The Federal Reserve is shrinking the balance sheet. That means they're selling about $500 billion worth of our bonds a year.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that's going into the market, not out of the market. That's a big change. We're also printing about $3 trillion in new debt a year from the federal government. So we've got $3 trillion hitting the markets instead of $500 billion. Plus, we've got another $500 billion coming off the Federal Reserve balance sheets back into the markets. So we've gone from $500 billion in government debt a year from the U.S. government
Mm-hmm.
to $3.5 trillion of government debt a year going into the markets. So that's doing two things. One is the treasury rates are always the foundational rate for how much money costs.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody will loan to the government for 5%, they'll probably loan to you for 7%, probably loan to me for 8%.
Yeah.
You know, they're going to decide on who's got to pay how much based on risk and other.
Yep. And the
other
government
terms.
always looks like less risk. Yeah.
Yep. And so the government rates are higher because we simply have to attract 7 times more customers to buy U.S. sovereign debt.
Yeah.
Than we had to find a few years ago. We don't really get that. It's a subtlety, but it's a big deal. It's also sucking up all the liquidity. Since the U.S. government is sucking $3.5 trillion out of the available capital markets in cash every year, well, that's less cash that somebody's looking for a customer for. So they're not coming to you looking to loan to you for your farm. They're not coming to me looking to loan to me for my farm. So all of a sudden, we have no liquidity. And that's what we're feeling. Competition from the government, higher rates coming because the government's moving an atrocious amount of debt. And our sovereign debt isn't any different in pattern, maybe only scale, than what's happening in Europe and other countries. All the major economies of the world are printing hordes of sovereign debt. That's sucking up all the liquidity out of the markets and making it very difficult to find resources to expand business with.
Yeah. I mean, for me, you know, and as an average consumer, it feels like we've been in a recession for a few months now. And they say that we're not on the data, but it feels like that at the consumer level.
Well, we're seeing that. I think what we're seeing, whether you're a consumer trying to put produce and protein on your dinner plate,
Yep.
think about air conditioning your home for some level of comfort here in the Central Valley, buying a car, putting gas in your car. This administration can get on the evening news and tell us every night
Yep.
how good things are, but we know better.
Yeah. Which they do every night.
We're feeling different, and it's not coherent. It's not relevant to us. It doesn't seem true. And I think that's what we're seeing in our in changing polls right now is that, you know, you can tell everyone how great they're doing, but if they put dinner on their credit card last year, now the credit card's maxed out, they're actually making hard choices at home right now because they can't figure out how to feed their family, clothe their family, get to work and back on money that used to go far enough.
Yeah.
They're going to want change. And I think that's what we're going to get.
Well, you know, moving forward from that, I think we see a lot of consumer trends now in the conversation happening more because, as we were just talking about, is I think information's being spread a lot faster through things like TikTok. And you voted no against the TikTok ban, correct?
I did.
Okay, so why did you do that? I think it's a very split thing. Some people don't understand it. I'm in agreement with you on some of the things, but why did you vote no on that?
Well, there are a couple reasons. First of all, I absolutely see problems with social media, whether it's social media censorship sometimes governed by the administration, as we see evidence of now. The administration haven't told Twitter and Facebook what to say and what not to say about Hunter's laptop or any other issue in the last election at critical times.
Yeah.
That's very dangerous. Very dangerous. We have to start dealing with that. The Section 230 protections that that these social media platforms get are there for bulletin boards where people don't control the content or entities don't control the content. Insofar as social media controls its content, its Section 230 protections shouldn't exist, and so we need to reassess those protections that social media has. Foreign ownership of American business, foreign ownership of farmland, foreign ownership of our media companies is always a concern, and we should understand clearly what are our foreign ownership rules. But any time that we're taking a proper noun, such as perhaps John Duarte, or Donald Trump or TikTok, and we're making a law that has to include that proper noun to do what we want to do, we're not making a law that's based on principles of justice and fairness and objectivity. We're making a law based on something we don't like or someone we don't like. And that is a very bad road to go down. So when somebody wants to come to me with a bill about social media or Chinese business ownership, and talk about the principle of what we're doing and the details of what we're trying to do and why it's the effective use of government power in the most judicious way, then we can pass a TikTok bill. And if they want to just say, hey, we don't like TikTok, we're going to go after TikTok, I'm going to ask that we're not quite that lazy and wait for something more thoughtful to come about and participate in something more thoughtful coming about.
Do you think some things that are more thoughtful is like Sarah Huckabee Sanders, I believe, did it in Arkansas? I don't think Chinese organizations are allowed to buy farmland in the state of Arkansas anymore. And it was a little bit more of a broader landscape. Do you feel like something like that could be more beneficial?
I think we want to take a good hard look at Chinese ownership of our food system. And so we had a hearing on this in the House just a week or two ago. And that's another thing you can get at Rep. John Duarte on Instagram. And it's really interesting. I went last because I'm a freshman, so I'm way down the road. Yeah. And so after we discussed Chinese ownership of farmland, I had some other questions. And I do believe we have to look at Chinese ownership of farmland and all of our food resources. Realize a couple things are structurally happening in the world today. One is, as we don't drill American oil, we don't get water on the farms, we abandon our resource here in America, we shrink our economy, we shrink opportunity for our working families. The Chinese upper middle class is larger in number than America's working families today. If you look at our wage-earning lower middle class families that really want the American dream and are being pushed, they are outsized in terms of discretionary income and in terms of raw numbers by the Chinese emerging upper middle class. And in that case, also the India has an emerging upper middle class that simply dwarfs the spending of our working families. So food is going to go to them first. The produce, the protein, the nutrition, the dietary diversity is going to go to those who can afford it. And so by America suppressing our economy over global warming, ESG, DEI, or whatever other nonsense they put out, the American working family is being outcompeted by foreign consumers that want those same goods. Meanwhile, we see here in the Valley, you're an almond guy. We're here in an almond warehouse. I'm an almond tree nursery. You guys are an almond tree nursery.
Yeah.
Not you guys, but anyways. Yeah. We've got this great nut industry. Almonds, pistachios, walnuts, all these mechanized crops are doing better and better. Of course, we've kind of caught the car now. We've got to wait for the market to balance out a bit. But what happened to all the hand labor crops? If we look at Mexico, we were importing about 4 million tons of Mexican produce a year in 2000. Today, we're importing about 20 million tons of Mexican produce here in 2022, 2023, and we have the last numbers, and that's going straight up. There's a lot of information coming to us that many of these produce, the Mexican Michoacan avocado industry, a lot of the capitalized agriculture in Mexico is actually cartel dollars. We've got Chinese cooperating with Mexican drug cartels, controlling our border, controlling fentanyl flows into America, really destroying our young people. Fentanyl is the largest cause of death of young people 18 to 40 right now in America. Meanwhile, they're they're using these same partnerships to control the produce production that's coming into America to feed us. The blueberries, the strawberries, the cantaloupes have all moved to Mexico. All the hand labor crops, the onions, they're all moving to Mexico. That food doesn't have to come to America. We have plenty of farmland here in the Central Valley, but we're too dumb to put water on it. So it's not really just farmland that provides our food security. We are allowing foreign interests that have not our best interests at heart to move our food production systems out of America, and they may not flow back into America to the working families that have expected them in the past going forward. And this is dangerous.
I think also there's not a lot of legislation behind dumping, which is what originally hurt the market.
Yeah,
I mean, China or Mexico coming in and just dumping avocados on our market, destroying what farm profits there were.
Yeah, and an individual Mexican producer can do that only for so long. But as you start to see, like we saw back in the 90s, and we've seen in other times when China gets involved or these sovereign countries get involved, the resources to facilitate long-term dumping, to really destroy our industry strategically and supplant them elsewhere, can be sustained at a much longer and more intensive time period. So watching China partner up with some of our neighbors to relocate our food industries and then leaving ourselves subject to either that food simply being exported somewhere else and not made available to American consumers, or their ability to then attack our markets from foreign sources, dump on them, and really, really kill any economics of us retaining our own industries at any level is dangerous. And so these are things that get beyond just, simply China shouldn't be buying our farmland. No, we should be worried about China controlling our food system generally. They already own Syngenta.
Yeah.
I had to give back a campaign check a few weeks ago because somebody criticized me for, having a Chinese food conglomerate giving me money. I was like, well, I don't know. And it turns out, Syngenta is part of a Chinese food conglomerate now. So I don't know. They used to be an American company.
Yeah.
But now they're not. And so we're seeing that more and more.
Yeah. Parent companies coming out of China controlling a lot that we do here.
Yeah.
So, hey, well, I appreciate you coming in. I think we've covered a lot, and I hope people in your district listen. I hope people across the valley listen, and people in the entire U.S., because I think what you're doing for us in Congress has been exactly what we asked for. But we did at the ballot box. We put a farmer in Congress, and I think you're representing this valley exactly the way that we want. And it's not easy. I'm sure every day feels like a UFC fight in there.
I'm honored and I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
But thank you, Sam. It's been great to be with you.
Yeah. Hey, a toast to you, man, and a toast to continued success. Thanks for watching The Toast. If you enjoy listening, like, subscribe, and comment. All those help us boost our audience so that more people can hear the messages and the stories that we have on this show. Now, if you know someone that might want to be a guest on The Toast, also DM us or email us, and let's see if we can work that out. Let's keep growing the agriculture community together.